So right now it looks like it's just you and me, so I'm okay getting started if you are. And I just wanted to ask you, what experience, if any, do you have with Figma already?
I do not have any experience with Figma. I only have used Adobe XD.
Okay, perfect. That's totally fine. One of the great things about those kind of UX tools like Sketch and Figma and XD is that they all have kind of similar aspects to them with little different things that are different. So we'll go into those as well during this session today. Um, cool. So I'm just going to go ahead and get started then. This is what it looks like when you open and download Figma. You can download it if you want to. You don't have to if you don't want to. It is a web app. I prefer the desktop app just because I'm a desktop app kind of person, but you can use it online completely if you'd like. One of the really cool things about being a SCAD student is that we actually get this educational discount. So the pro version of Figma is free for students and educators. You just have to sign up using your SCAD email, get verified, which you can do by clicking that button there, and then set up a team if you want to collaborate with people. So kind of like Adobe XD, you can collaborate with people and work together, and you can set up different projects in here, which is a very powerful tool. So when you launch Figma, it'll look something like this. You might not have any projects, you might not have any teams at this point, but that's okay. To make a new Figma document, it's super simple. We're just going to go up to the top left here where we see this plus button, and it makes a new document called Untitled. And there we go. And inside this space is our canvas, and you can see a couple different things are happening. So we have our layers on the left. We have our pages. So each document can have a couple different canvases, and you can put these on pages. Sometimes you'll do this for iterations of a product. So maybe you have like a lo-fi as page one, and then a mid-fi as page two. So you can do like, lo-fi, and then you can do hi-fi, or something like that. So you can kind of switch between these canvases, which is very nice. On the right, we have our three kind of inspector panels. So design is for how things look, prototype is how they work, and then inspect is for if you actually wanted to code this, it'll actually spit out the code for you about how that should work in different coding languages, which is super powerful. But to get started, if you've used a tool like Adobe XD, you have a much similar panel over on the left here. We've got our move and scale tools over on the left side. To the right, we have our frame and slice. So frame is just like artboard if you've used XD before. We have all of our different shapes that we can make. Again, very similar to XD. We have a pen and pencil tool, and then our text tool. I don't usually actually click up here. Usually I'll actually use the keyboard shortcuts just because I'm a speedy kind of guy, but you're more than welcome to do whatever you want with that. So to get started in the space of like a design area, we want to have something called a frame. So everything that we do wants to be contained in a frame, and we can just click that frame button and draw it out if we want to. Or what we can do is if we click that frame button, it has a couple already made for us. So I'm going to go to this phone here, and maybe I want to do an iPhone 13 or 13 Pro. And now I've got this canvas that I can put practically anything on. So maybe I want this to be a sign-up screen. I can say with my text tool, sign up. And then I'm going to go ahead and switch to the scale tool so it scales everything proportionally. I'm going to move that up. It's worth noting if I don't use that scale tool, and this is like kind of a tricky thing with Figma, if I just try to scale it like normal, it's only going to scale that text box. If I want to scale everything at the same time, we're going to go ahead and go to scale tool over here or press K. And now we can scale it proportionally up and down, and that text will get bigger or smaller. That's great if you have lots of different text boxes with different sizes of text, but for the most part, since we're going to be working with like this header kind of thing, it'll be better to use that K scale tool. So we've got this sign up here, and let's say we want to make a couple text fields at the bottom. So I'm going to go ahead and take that rectangle tool, and just like I would in Photoshop or XD or Illustrator or anything, I'm going to go ahead and draw a couple rectangles here. Ooh, I accidentally made it a little bigger than I meant to. And so I've got these rectangles, and that's looking good. And when I click on one of these rectangles, or really anything, if you look on the right side here, you can see a couple of different things change. So if I click on a rectangle, it's one of the more basic items. I have, X and Y coordinates. So, I can change these if I click on the little icon here just by dragging, which is really nice. So we got those X and Y coordinates. We've got that width and then also height adjustment. I can also change the angle, and this is a special one for rectangles. I can change how rounded the corners are, which are really nice. It's a great feature to have in a UI application. We have some constraints. I don't usually bother with these unless I'm doing auto layout stuff, so we'll get to those in a little bit, but we got these constraints on the right-hand side in case we need to change those. We have global layer items. So for example, if we wanted our opacity of this to go down, we can just choose maybe a 90% opacity. And now when I move these over each other, you can see that it kind of blends. It's that like lower opacity. All right, let's put that back up to 100. Cool. And then underneath that, I have the fill. So if I want to change the color of this, maybe I want it to be a little bit lighter, maybe I want it to be a little bit darker, I can do that through here. Or maybe we want to define a style for our app. So maybe we want to go with this like pastel color. That's another option that we can do. We can kind of color it in through here. One of the interesting things about Figma that is maybe a little bit newer is that you can actually have multiple of these fills if you want to. So we can click this little plus button here. And maybe I want it to be darker on the outside, and or maybe you want it to be linear. So maybe it'll be lighter on the left and darker on the right. I can click on this fill, and instead of kind of changing it just within this area in the middle where there's the color, I'm going to go up to where it says solid, and I can make a linear fill. I want it to be darker on the left and lighter on the right. I'm just going to change this to be black, and then black at 0 opacity. And you can see it kind of has that going on. But I can change this value here by clicking on it and then just typing 100. So now I have this kind of like gradient as well. This is great if you want to get a gradient in, and you can see, you know, there's lots of different kinds. We have the radial option. You can do like an angular gradient. You can make a diamond gradient. You can even put in an image if you want to. So there's lots of flexibility with fills. And then you have that same option for strokes and effects. So if I want to have a stroke, again, it's very intuitive. It's just like a stroke would work in Illustrator or XD. We can move that up and down. I can change it to be maybe a specific value that I want. If I want to change the color, I can do that right over there. Nice. And with strokes, there's a couple other options in these this ... section here. So I can change it to be a dash if I want to, and I can change how often that dash is. So if I want lots of them, I can make this value smaller. If I want maybe just a couple big ones, I can make that value really big. I can change within the dashing if it's a rounded corner or a rounded edge, which is also a really good feature to have. So these are all kind of different options that you have when you're working with shapes. The last one that's really nice is this effects panel, and there are currently 4 different effects. We have an inner shadow, which looks just like that. It's like a shadow that's on the inside of the device. See how there's like a little bit of depth to that one? It looks like you could like go into the shape. There's also drop shadow, which is kind of the more classic shadow, and you know, we can make that a little bit lower, and we can make that a little bit blurrier, or maybe not quite as blurry. So we got a drop shadow, which is really nice. We have a layer blur. So if I want to blur this layer specifically, I can do that with this effect. And I mean, really blur it out, or I can just put like a little blur if I want it to look a little out of focus. And the last thing, which is probably my favorite, is background blur. And it's a little tough to see when we just have a couple shapes. So I'm going to make a new rectangle on top of all of these. I'm going to make it white, but not completely opaque. I'm going to leave a little bit of transparency. And check out what happens when I add this background blur to it. It kind of gets that like frosted glass kind of look. I don't know about you, but I go absolutely crazy over this. This is like one of my favorite things in the world, is this this kind of frosted glass effect. And it can be lighter, it can be darker, it can be whatever color you want it to be, but that's a background blur. It just kind of blurs out the background of that object. So those are all the options for something like a shape or a vector. And then under text, we also have a couple different options. So as you would expect, you know, we can change the font here. So let's do something like enter. And then we have the line spacing. So, you know, if we have multiple lines, I'm just going to say like, hello world. We'll see if I typed that correctly. I didn't. So we can grab all these guys. And then we have the line spacing. So this would be like how tall the line itself is. And then the spacing in between the lines. Right now we just have the enter, so there isn't any of those. So we have, if I were to go back and press enter, now we got that. So if I make this bigger, you have a different line, so it'll go a little differently there. That's the leading. And then we also have different constraints. So for example, if I had a lot of text and I just wanted to set how wide it could be and it could go as far down as it wanted, I could use this button. If I had text that I really only want to be on one line, we have this button for the auto width. And then also if I just have an area that I want the text to be in, we can use this kind of fixed size. And that's a really powerful tool for shaping text if you're going to be putting it in your UI. That's a really cool way to do it. We also have the super traditional, center, right, left align. And if we want to, we can make this bigger and I can show you the middle and down alignment. It also supports, if you're into web development at all, it also supports any kind of CSS properties that font might have. So you can go through and underline or strike through, or maybe give it like a bullet point or something like that. So these are different options that we can do if you want to go into those. But that is text. And I'm just going to move that and I'm going to create it so that it's auto width, just so that that text box kind of shows up only on that sign up button. All right, so that's editing properties of different objects. We can edit text properties. We can edit the color and position of these properties here. And that's all well and good. And you can totally design an app very well from just those items. But one of the cool things about Figma is the community and plugins. And so I'm going to talk about a couple of those because they can really help you to do a lot of work super quickly. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is a couple of my favorite plugins. I'm just going to make a text box through here. Now, what's really neat about this next plugin is that you can use it to create dummy text. So maybe instead of 54, I want it to be 10. And the way you access plugins is by pressing Command or Control P. And I'm just going to type in lorem ipsum, and it'll pop up there. And what's really great about this plugin is that you can choose to have it auto-generate as much text as will fit inside that box. So if you have like kind of a description area, you can kind of just fill it really, really easily. And so that's a really good one. Another good one is for imagery. So maybe I want to have a nice background for this, and maybe the background that I want is for something like we got kind of a fire theme going on. So maybe I want like a volcano or like lava. So same thing, I'm going to press Command P or Control P, and I'm going to type in pixels. And the cool thing about pixels is that you can search for images and it'll pop up with a bunch of royalty-free. You don't have to credit the artist images that have been donated to Pexels from their environment. So I like how one of these two, Pixabay, fill color, we'll do fills. And what's great is since I had the frame selected here, it automatically knew like, okay, cool, you're gonna select the photo. I'm just gonna put it in that frame once you click on it. There's a little bit of a contrast issue here. So I'm gonna do another fill on top of this image fill that was put in. So Pexels put in that image. I'm gonna put another fill on top of it. I'm just gonna make it a little bit brighter. And that way we can read some of that text without it getting in the way, which is nice. If you'd like to do more with plugins, you can do that same Command P and just type in plugins. And it'll give you all the plugins that you have. And then at the bottom, it'll also give you the ability to browse the plugins in community and manage your plugins. So that's a good way to find them and see things that'll work well for you. All right, so we've got one of these pages, and your app will have a different solution no matter which kind of topic space you go into. It'll look different. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pretend that we're making an app for plants. And so I have this app that was kind of made by the people at Figma, and it's called Twigma. And I'm going to use this as an example so you can see how to kind of put different things together. So if you look at this, I mean, it's very similar to what we had before. We've got some illustrations in the background, and we've got some different colors, but Hopefully you can see how using the tools that we've had so far, over time you could kind of make all of this stuff all by yourself. I mean, it's all just text and rectangles and images and stuff like that that you've brought in. So it's fairly straightforward. And what I'd like to do is start prototyping these together so that you can kind of tap on this button and it'll bring you to this one. And maybe you want to tap on that button and it'll bring us back there. And the way we do that is through this prototype menu. So we're going to click prototype here. And you'll notice when I hover over things in the prototype menu, I get a little dot on the side. You can kind of see it over there. And what that dot is for is if I hover over it and then click and then drag over to the screen that I want it to go to, and then let go, it says, okay, on tap, you're going to navigate to, and then this screen. Right now, we're not going to worry about animations. I'll kind of show that off in a moment. But we're going to bring it over. And then also, because I need to think of a way to get back, I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to click and drag so that we have that back button over there. And if I want to take a look at what this would look like, I'm going to go ahead and click this play button that got automatically made for me. It's going to take a second. Ooh, and it looks like we made it for the wrong phone size. Let's do this then. Instead of a 13 Pro, is it a normal 11 Pro? Let's see. That looks a lot better. So if I click on this now, you can see it brings me to that page. And that's a really powerful tool for prototyping. So you can kind of simulate what it would be like to go between pages, and maybe we can kind of get the rest of this flow together. So if I bring that over and then I want to add it to the cart, so I'm going to tap on this guy. I'm going to bring it over here. Let's get rid of this flow. We don't need that there. We're going to bring that over there. And it looks like this one has a couple already, which is great. I'm going to click this checkout button and we're going to bring it over the checkout area. I'm going to continue as a guest here. And then I think we have a button at the bottom of this one. Yeah, so I'm just going to make it so when you tap on this payment thing, it brings us over here. And then this next button is going to bring us over here. And then the shipping order is bringing us over here. Now for each of these steps that you can go back, I also want to make sure I hook up these back buttons, just to make sure if you're going through the prototype, there's always a way to get back. And it looks like that one goes there. But heck, go for it. What's up?
I just wanted to ask if multiple buttons can be put into one frame. So if I click two different places, it takes me to the same page.
Yeah, totally. So if I want to have, maybe this plant will also bring us over to this one. You can have as many of those as you want.
Got it.
For sure. Is everything else kind of making sense so far? Did you have any other questions about anything else so far?
No, this is great.
Okay, cool. So if we go into that prototyping mode, we can tap on this and I can say add to cart, or if I go back here, oop, looks like I didn't prototype that properly. The one that I missed. Okay. So if I go back now, I can also tap this one in the middle and it'll bring me to that same spot. I can go to checkout. I'm going to continue as guest. I'm going to tap 2 to go to payment and the next to go to confirm, and I'll submit my order. And now I have like an actual screen flow. Like I can go from one side of the screen to the other, which is pretty cool. If you want to, and this is something that I am very passionate about personally, so we'll only spend like a minute or two on it. But if you want to, you can actually make these animations a little bit better. So if you ever use something like PowerPoint or Keynote, or even XD actually, you have a lot of the same things, so we can move in or move out or push or slide in or slide out or dissolve between the screens. Generally speaking, we don't want to do this too much because too much animation can disorient the user, and that's not a fun time, but that's something you can do just to kind of bring it up a little bit higher fidelity. So like for example, for this add to cart one, maybe I want this to like shift over to signify that we're going from the shop tab to the cart tab. So what we can do is we can tell this maybe push, right? Yeah, that looks like the right one. We can ease in and out. And if I want to see what that looks like, I just go back here and it goes back. So that's a really good way to kind of like test things ahead of time. And then what you can do is you can actually just share this with someone. So if you wanted someone to test it and say like, hey, this is something that I want to, see if you can get through it, or I want to, test my UI to see if it actually works, you can do that through here too, which is really helpful to have as a tool. In terms of actually building out the UI, a lot of times what you can do is use something called UI kits. We talked about this a little bit in the XD workshop yesterday, but the way that you do it in Figma is you go to this little home button and then go to community over here. And if you search for UI kit, you can get lots and lots and lots of different UI kits. Some of them for like the new Safari, some of them are for like finding a roommate. There's ones that are more general. So like this one's called Uber Light, and you can duplicate these into your own area, which is really helpful so that you can just kind of pull elements from this so that you don't have to design something like a button or a text field or a switch or a slider or pagination. Like you can get all that from someone else's design, and that way it kind of makes the visual fidelity a little bit higher. So in terms of like walking through the Figma features, those are the basic ones. If you'd like, because you are here, I can go into like some of the more advanced things like components or auto layout, or if you want, I would totally be willing to kind of talk to you about your project and different ways that you might want to implement it on your end. So I'm okay with doing either one of those things.
Can you talk more about the components part?
Absolutely, yeah. So they're called different things in different apps. So in Sketch, I think they're called symbols or something of that nature. But the idea is that if I have a button that I use all the time, or if I have a UI element that's going to be consistent across all of them, for example, something like this card. If we look at this card, it's pretty much the same thing. We have a different image on the inside, but it's a very similar structure. And so what I can do is I can actually go over here. I'm going to copy and paste this guy and bring him over. And I'm going to look at, is it this one? Yeah, I'm going to look at what they got going on here. So we have an image over here, and then I have a title and a description, and then I have 4 different swatches, and then I have the price. And so it would be nice, in theory, if I could just make one card and then kind of treat it like a fill in the blank system going forward. So what we can do is exactly that. I'm going to show you here. I need to move some of my Zoom stuff real quick. So if we go up here, with any item selected, you'll have this little quadruple diamond thing. And so if I click on this, you'll see it turns purple first and foremost, and then you get that same little diamond thing, but it's filled in. And what that means is just that I've made a component. And the benefit of components is that if I were to copy and paste this and bring another one in, see how it doesn't have the title above it and it doesn't have that diamond. And if I go over to my layer menu, it doesn't have the diamond, it has a different looking diamond. That just tells you that this is a child element of this parent element. And what's nice about that is, let's say this one is a different thing. So I'm just going to grab the image from in here and stick it in here. Let's say that we want to title it something different. So this is going to be the green plant, and the description is one size. And let's say I want to give it just one of these swatches. I'm going to take one of those away. It only comes in white and green and beige. And so this is great because but I could have just copied and pasted it and moved it. The benefit of using components is that, let's say if I think this text is a little too big, check this out. As I move it down on my parent component, it affects every single child component that I have in my composition or in my app file. And so it's a really powerful tool to, maybe I want this image to be smaller, so I can move that out. And all the other ones in the entire composition will change in relation to that parent component. And so for something like a toggle, maybe I don't want to have to design a toggle every single time. So I'm going to design one toggle. I'm just going to do that really quickly here because toggles are pretty easy. I'm going to move this with an ellipse. There we go. And I'm going to make this ellipse larger. Okay, so this is my like toggle that I've created. And because it's a plant-based app, we're going to go ahead and grab that plant color. There we go. So maybe I don't want to have to design a new toggle every single time. What I can do is I can just make it a component. I'm going to name this toggle. And if I go over to my assets panel, it'll actually show me all the different components that I have. And you can see that this toggle is right there. What I can do is every single time I want to toggle, like, I don't know why you would want to do this, but maybe actually, you know, let's find a different one. Maybe, okay, so there's a toggle here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring my toggle in. And now if maybe I don't like how big this ellipse is, maybe I want that ellipse to be smaller. I can bring in my parent component, and any changes I make to this parent component in all the hundreds of places I have on my app that I'm using this, all of the places that I use that parent component, it'll update across everything. Which is great. Same thing for like tab bars. Tab bars are another really good example of this, where you have one element that's going to be consistent. And if I wanted to change this from saying cart to shopping, for example, I would have to do that on every single one of these. And, you know, I can copy and paste, but that would get pretty boring very quickly. And so if I had a component for this bottom bar, I could update it once, and on all of my screens, it would automatically update, which is a great time saver. And it helps you with consistency, which is really helpful.
I had a question.
Yeah, go for it. What's that? No, for sure.
So how do you find out where your parent button is? Because sometimes you tend to get lost and like you don't know where you placed it. So how do you find that out?
Definitely. In fact, I'm going to hide it. Sure. I don't know where it went. I mean, I know it's up here somewhere, but let's say I didn't know that. Figma has a really nice way of doing that, and that is on any child element. You can right click and go to main component. If you click on that, it'll bring you right to that main component. It'll show you where it is. Cool. Another really cool thing about components is that very recently, actually, within the last little bit, they have created this thing called component states. And component states are a very powerful tool you can use to kind of determine how components are going to work. So we're going to do another variant here. And if you think about a toggle, that usually has one of two states. It's either on or off. So I'm going to turn this one off, and maybe this is going to be like a gray color. That looks nice to me. And again, because everything I do inside this component gets updated across all of my instances of this component, all of my other components get this for free, but you know, it didn't move, it didn't change anything. What I can do is I can change what this property is. So I'm going to call it toggle, and we're going to call it on as the first one, and we're going to say off as the second one. And Figma is actually smart enough. Sometimes for these, it'll say like a drop down where you can select multiple of them. But for this one, it'll actually say, okay, you have two states. One of them is on, one of them is off. And so it's smart enough that when you go to edit this guy, check this out. I have two states. I can turn it on and off through this little toggle here, which is really nice. Maybe I wanted to also have kind of a separate property. Maybe I want to have a property for how big that middle thing is. So I can go through here and just change both of these to be, instead of 12 by 12, let's say 18 by 18. I'm gonna shift those up. And so it's a little confused because it says, okay, cool, I know what on is, I know what off is, but I have these two other ones, and so I don't quite know what to do with that. If you go up here though and say, I'm gonna add a new property, we basically have two separate properties we can control, whether it's on or off on this axis, or whether it's small or big in the middle. So I'm going to change this thing to nubbin size. And now if I select both of these, it'll say, okay, the toggle is mixed. You have one that's on and one that's off, but the nubbin size for both of those is default. I don't like that. We're going to change this to small. And same thing for this one. The toggle is mixed. That makes sense. Nub inside. We're going to make this large. I should also go into this one, and the toggle is on. And for this one, the toggle is off. And now that I've done, just a little bit of work setting that up inside this component across all of the different instances that I want to use a toggle, if I go into this toggle that's over here, now I have two properties that I can control. I can control whether it's on or off, or I can control if it's large or small. Both of those completely independent of each other. So both on and off and large and small. So I have all of those combinations together. You can go crazy with one of these. Maybe I want to have a completely different version of all of these where it's not rounded on the edges. I don't know why you'd do that, but you totally can. So if I wanted to do this, and maybe instead of 100, we'll just do like 20. No, maybe like 5. There we go. So it's got like a rounded rectangle. And maybe that's what I want one of the versions of my toggles to look like. You can go through, and again, I'm going to make this new property of this on these variants, and I'm going to say pill shape. And I'm going to select all these guys, and the pill shape is going to be off. No, this one's on. Pill shape is going to be on. And for all these guys, pill shape is going to be off. And now when I go into this guy, I have all these different options for each different kind of states that I've made. And it's so powerful. It is really, really powerful when you're making UIs to have that flexibility and say, ooh, maybe I should have a different one. Another really common one is buttons. So if I make a rectangle here, we can kind of have a button. Do we have any buttons on this? Yeah, let's replace this next button with like a nicer next button. So I kind of have the basis for my button there. I'm going to put some text in the middle. We're going to call it next. I'm just going to scale this text down a little bit. And that looks good to me. And so this is what our button might look like. I'm going to change this so it's a little bit smaller. That's a lot better. Okay. That's our next button. And maybe you want to have like a little arrow to the right just to kind of give that visual interest that it's the next button. So I'm going to make a line there. And then on the right side, I'm going to make a little line arrow. On the left side, I'm going to make it round because we like round things here. And maybe I like the green that I had from before, so I'm just going to select this rectangle, press the I button for the eyedropper, and I'm just going to eyedrop that color. And I think it'd be better to have white in here. And this is another really great thing about Figma is that I can select multiple different types of things and say that maybe I want this stroke to be white and the fill of that next button to be white. So I got all that. That's looking like a pretty good button to me. Maybe this arrow's a little too big. There we go. Okay, so now that I have this, I'm going to select all these guys. And again, I'm just going to make that a component. I'm going to call this a button. If you look closely, you can see that it popped up over there. I'm going to get rid of this button and drag in this button. And something I'm noticing immediately is that it's a little small in terms of like the font size. And I could do this where I just kind of like scale up this button, but that's not really useful if I have to scale it up every time. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to scale up the parent button, and that'll scale up again, like all the different versions of it that I have. Let's put this in the middle. Now it looks like they also have another kind of button that they've made. And so if I want to incorporate that into my button, what I can do is just kind of like make this frame a little bit bigger. I'm going to make a new variant. And I'm actually going to bring in their button into my component here. So I'm just going to copy that and then paste that in there. Oops, I need to make this a component first. So if I drag this in here, now that's another variant. And it looks like I got the color a little bit wrong. So what I can do is I can just eyedrop that color and it automatically updates on my other one, which is great. Another really cool thing that Figma has is the ability to copy a style. So you can copy just the properties or paste just the properties with Option Command C or Alt Control C. I do that all the time when I just want to, get the style of something and change it. So let's move this over here. And we have this nice full width button now, and it's consistent with my other one. But we're going to do the same thing we did before. So property 1 is pill shape. And this next button, it is off. And for the submit order button, is on. So now I can change between the two of those, but there's something missing, and that's because the text is changing in between them. That's just something that with components, because we have two different things on the inside, we could probably call this title or text or something like that, just so it's a little bit more generic. And now if I override that text in here, if I say next in the middle there, it'll keep that option that I changed. So it'll remember that it's pretty much the same thing. So that's like kind of an intro into components. They're really, really useful. I design with components, even though it might seem like it's a little slower at first. It's just so versatile as you go on. And if anytime you need to make changes to like every something, it's really helpful to keep things consistent. So you only have to do it once, not like the 20 times that you have a button or a toggle on your artboards. So that's components. Do you have any questions about components that I could help with, or are you feeling pretty good about them?
Yeah, seems pretty good.
Okay. One of the other really great things about Figma is they have fantastic documentation and help. So if you go to their documents on their website, I think they actually have it even here. They might not. Okay, if we just do Figma documentation, they probably have it on a, yeah, they have it on a different website. So help.figma.com. And you want to know like, hey, how do I do a component? You can type in component. And they have a guide here just for you. And they have a video tutorial and an overview if you're more of like a text related person. They have a lot of really great granular articles about this. So how to create a component, how to use variants. We talked about that. Naming and organizing components, creating an instance of a component. We did that too. Swapping between component instances, overriding properties of an instance. So all these things here are really great to learn when you're trying to learn about components. And so they have really, really great documentation and all that stuff. So that's another really great thing about Figma too. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to talk a little bit about auto layout. We're not going to get too far into it because it is a pretty complicated topic. And if you'd like to learn more about it, I do have a half-hour session on it from last quarter that I did for Flux. But essentially what you can do is if we kind of group all these layers together and say frame selection, we get this option to make an auto layout. And what that does is it just gives us like parametric controls. Oh, it looks like these guys weren't all together. That's not great. I use this document because Figma made it, but I guess it might not be everything I hoped it for it to be. Are all grouped? Are we all good? We are. Okay, cool. So if I make this auto layout here, it just gives you parametric controls for spacing, for direction. So like maybe I wanted these things to be next to each other. I could make them next to each other instead. If I want specific padding, so maybe I wanted this to have like a dark gray background, I'll do something like that. And I can give it padding on the edges so it has a little bit of space to breathe in, and maybe want these corners to be round or something like that. And I can also align these objects. It makes a little less sense when they're all the same size, but like if I wanted to make them align in different ways, it's just a really powerful tool for, something like this, where we have a couple things next to each other, or in size here. You have all these equally distributed items, so it's nice to make it on a layout. And again, the benefit is that the spacing between all these is going to be consistent, and you can adjust different things parametrically so that I don't have to like shift this guy up a little bit every single time I want it to be different or move. I can just kind of say, okay, everybody get a little tighter, and now they're all a little tighter, which is a very good help when you're designing UIs. So that's a good way to do that. Again, Figma has fantastic documentation and a really great community. So the documentation on auto layout is really good. They actually have what they call a playground. So you can play around with auto layout and they kind of show you how to do it within a Figma file, which is really great. And that's about it. What other questions do you have about Figma or prototyping? Or maybe if you have any questions for your specific app, like the thing that you're going to be doing, I can help answer those. We have about 10 minutes left if you have any questions.
Not really. I don't have any questions anymore. I still have to build my app, so I don't have much to show it to you.
That's okay.
But this was really helpful. Yeah.
I'm so glad. And if you have any more questions or you do, have any questions about anything, I'm going to be free pretty much all week. So feel free to reach out to me here at my school email, hreally22@student.scad.edu. I'm also in the Discord, so if you have any questions about sessions, you can go to the sessions questions channel and ask anything about any of the sessions there, and I'll be able to help you out with that too. All right, well, that's all I had for you. I hope you have a great startup, and I hope you win specifically because of key insights you learned in this Figma workshop. And
Thank
if
you
you need
so
anything
much.
else, let me know.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. All right, take care. Bye.
Bye bye.